As an ethics advocate, what do you think when you see that? I mean, it's obvious you could lose your seat over this.
If that's correct and other lawyers say it, then I'll have to look at it.
Jody Barr with KXAN. Yes. We've been trying to get a hold of you for several weeks. We called, we emailed, but he never replied. Do you plan to pay these fines?
Yes.
Do you plan to file the reports? Yeah. What would you say to this representative if he was in here today about complying, paying his debt to society?
You raised these questions, and because of that, we were happy to have it briefed today. And thank you so much for bringing it to our attention.
After he reported it to us, we put our own cameras up, capturing TxDOT workers dumping at the site 10 different times in 2 months. Did you have an idea at that time that the oil interest, when it came to Christy Craddock, was as vast as it turns out to be?
You know, I'm surprised to learn what I've learned based on your investigations.
This has been going on for 9 months. Has the city taken any steps to try to understand how in the world Llano Police Department got in the shape it's in?
Now, this is absolutely what we meant to do, Jody.
Here's the City of Austin's engineering study. I couldn't find an engineer's name on this study, a signature, a seal.
Clearly, these are in two different worlds. This is not a sealed study.
Is that what you intended?
It is not.
Do you believe there may have been a climate of corruption at that department?
No.
There's a secret tucked below this Dripping Springs welcome sign. You likely smell it before you ever see it.
Yeah, I'm looking down here. I'm seeing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 deer in here that I can visibly see. And it just keeps getting worse as you walk around, and this is about 15 feet deep right here.
Jimmy Lovejoy grew up here. He played in the creeks and streams that, when it rains, flow past, through, and over this dump site.
There's bones everywhere in here.
When he spotted dozens of buzzards circling this site last fall, he got nosy.
Yeah, you know, really when you're looking at this site, you don't have the gravity of this site without the sense of smell. And the smell here is horrible. It reeks of death. Yeah. It reeks of decay.
Lovejoy hid cameras at the site and within days caught the culprit on camera. The Texas Department of Transportation. After he reported it to us, we put our own cameras up, capturing TxDOT workers dumping at the site 10 different times in 2 months. Several loads of highway trash, a worker pulling a dead deer off the back of a truck, and other TxDOT workers doing something here after dark. We also found a pit of this black tar-like material.
You can smell it. It smells like some kind of oil. Close that up. All right.
To find out what TxDOT left seeping into the soil, we took the sample to this Austin lab for testing.
The results showed very, very high levels in the gasoline and diesel range, which is very, very high for a sample that is not pure oil.
Looking for answers, we tracked down the TxDOT trucks just 6 miles away to this Hays County TxDOT garage, along with some of the workers we caught on camera. These are some of the photographs we got of this dump site.
I can't see that right now, sir.
You can't see it? Okay. I just want to let you know you're the man in charge of this garage, of what we. That day, our cameras caught TxDOT workers scooping up the oil and hauling it away. The video also shows a TxDOT worker raking dirt over the spot.
And then I think over here you can even see where they've tried to remove it.
There they are dumping. Dr. Neil Carman spent 12 years working as an investigator with the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality.
You can smell the hydrocarbons, I mean, besides the dead animals, but you know, this looks pretty bad. This needs to be cleaned up. I mean, it's an illegal dump.
TxDOT's own policies show dead animals are supposed to be buried or taken to a licensed landfill. The same for the tires, trash, and garbage. Just days after we asked TxDOT for an interview, they sent out a cleanup crew. What do you know about this dump site out in Hays County?
I understand that it's our right-of-way. It's TxDOT right-of-way that we use, and it's an area that we have some material stored in that we use in maintenance operations.
We showed TxDOT's Director of District Operations, Randy Hopman, what we found.
I mean, that was an entire pit of that.
Well, and it's been removed now, right?
Well, some of it. There's still chunks of it on the ground.
Hopman admits TxDOT workers broke the rules.
Do you believe this agency owes the public an apology?
Well, I'll agree that, as I stated earlier, that the materials were not disposed of properly. They're not bad materials. As I said, the asphalt materials used on roadways across the state of Texas for construction and maintenance operations. We have procedures for disposing of unneeded materials, and that was not followed.
After our questions, state environmental investigators showed up at the site to launch an investigation.
And that's the tree line back there.
Yeah.
I'm standing on 10 to 12 feet of fill that's in here. What else did they dump down underneath here? This one here is just a blatantly out-face slap in the face of my neighbors. And I consider TxDOT my neighbor too until today.
We'll keep you updated on that investigation by the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. I also asked TxDOT whether the agency plans to discipline any of the employees involved in this dump site. That has yet to be determined. But tonight, TxDOT has replaced the trash out here with this green sheeting. It's used for erosion control and to help grass grow. In Hays County, Jody Barr, KXAN Investigates. If you're really quiet and hold your breath, you can stand pretty much anywhere in West Texas and hear the heartbeat of the Texas economy. It's a 24/7 operation, and lots of people are striking black gold right now.
Oh, yeah.
Like Sergio Ortiz.
You see the dollars rolling here, right? Yes, sir.
He's become one of the most popular men in this West Texas oil patch. His family owns this tire repair shop in the town of Big Lake, a shop he almost closed 3 years ago when the oil boom busted.
There have been some pretty down times that it's been where I don't know if we want to be doing this anymore. Me and my wife actually had to sit down and think about, like, is it worth it?
Now, as the U.S. oil supply shifts in Texas's favor, this area is seeing some of the highest per barrel prices in years. The Ortiz family can tell it too. They can barely stock enough tires to keep up with the tens of thousands of trucks rolling through each day.
It's the oil or nothing around here.
This meeting, the Railroad Commission of Texas, will come to order.
Christy Craddock is the first Craddock to chair the Railroad Commission, but the family name spans decades in Texas government.
Have all voted members.
Her father, Tom Craddock, was the Texas House Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, members, back to my explanation.
Today, he's Midland's state representative. The Craddock oil businesses go back just as far, with oil interests spread across 22 Texas counties. Records we found show Christy Craddock holds potentially millions of dollars in oil interest. Not that surprising. It's what she's voted on as chair of this regulatory body that got our attention. Our investigative team traveled into the heart of Craddock country. We made the trip because tracking the family's oil interests is complicated, since only a couple counties post the records for the public to see online. We drove a few thousand miles, made stops in a dozen West Texas courthouses, searched through decades of land and oil records, and uncovered evidence that Christy Craddock and her family are doing personal business with many of the oil companies she regulates from her seat of power. Like in January.
All in favor say aye. Aye. Motion passes. Those items are approved.
Craddock voted on a rule change, easing restrictions on this Reagan County oil field known as Ringo 9. County records show Tom and Christy Craddock own mineral rights in this field through two separate companies, Craddock Partners Limited and Christy Craddock's personal company, Quarry LLC. The Ringo 9 wells produced 58,000 barrels of oil in the past year. By our calculations, these wells pumped out around $5 million in oil and gas production. Railroad Commission records show Craddock did not disclose her interest in this well.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion passes. Those items are approved.
That's just one of the cases we found.
Approved. Those items are approved. Motion passes. Items approved. Thank you.
State records show Commissioner Craddock also voted on rule changes to help produce more oil in different oil leases and oil fields across Texas, where the Craddocks own mineral interests. Christy Craddock's annual financial filing shows several different oil operators paying the Craddocks tens of thousands of dollars each year. Those filings also show the Craddocks own stock in some operators. Those same companies brought business before the Railroad Commission.
Those items are approved.
Archived video shows Christy Craddock cast votes in favor of those same companies. Since 2014, Craddock voted more than 400 times on agendas related to those companies, and records show no evidence Craddock ever disclosed her ties. As an ethics advocate, what do you think when you see that?
What I saw was clearly appearance of bias, at least. Commissioners are voting on matters that they have financial stakes in.
Adrian Shelley heads Texas Public Citizen, a government ethics watchdog group.
Sunset Commission has a quorum.
Shelley's group spent hours testifying before the Texas Sunset Advisory Commission in 2013. It determines whether a state agency like the Railroad Commission is doing an efficient and honest job for the people of Texas. Shelley's group found evidence they say shows railroad commissioners' political campaigns were funded mostly by oil companies they regulate. In some cases, those companies gave campaign cash, even while the commissioners were making decisions involving those companies. Did you have an idea at that time that the oil interest, when it came to Christy Craddock, was as vast as it turns out to be?
You know, I'm surprised to learn what I've learned based on your investigations. I don't want to see these sorts of specific holdings from a commissioner that create the appearance of bias that I've seen here.
We made multiple attempts to interview Commissioner Craddock and her father and business partner, Representative Tom Craddock. Neither agreed to interview. We found Commissioner Craddock at a September Railroad Commission meeting and sat up front to wait for the meeting to end. Craddock usually stays after meetings to sign orders, but this time she bolted.
This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Craddock rushed out a back door before we could even ask her a question. Ms. Craddock. We also checked the financial holdings of Craddock's fellow commissioners, Wayne Christian and Ryan Sitton. Outside of campaign contributions, our investigation did not find they're in business with oil companies. Commissioner Wayne Christian says his only investments are in general mutual funds.
I own no oil interest, no very few royalty, none, no royalty interest of any kind, no lease interest. So I wish I did have a bunch of oil and gas investments.
If you could buy that, would you buy that today and serve on this commission?
I'd probably have to question that very close with my attorney and the ethics attorney. I have an ethics attorney. I would pass it by them, make sure that I'm following the rules and regulations, but I have no interest in doing that.
Commissioner Ryan Sitton doesn't even want the perception he has a conflict of interest. Is it hard to separate yourself from this industry if you were financially tied to pieces of that industry?
I just don't want people out there asking those questions.
When we ask him about a scenario like Craddock's,
if I'm voting on an item and I own direct interest in that item, a well, a disposal process, anything, a pipeline, then yes, that would be a conflict of interest.
Some of what I have seen today is evidence for exactly why we need ethics reform. And I think that lawmakers who see that evidence will think hard about what needs to be done at the Railroad Commission. We need folks who are willing to take a stand against that. The status quo is not enough here in Texas.
Commissioner Craddock's staff sent a statement saying the sole purpose of each of Chairman Craddock's votes has been to ensure the enhancement and safe operations of the Texas energy industry, preventing waste and protecting correlative rights. Any suggestion to the contrary is entirely without merit, unconfirmed by her voting record, and unreflective of her integrity. Her father wrote us that he has 2 small working interests that he's owned for 40+ years. The rest of his interests are minerals and overriding royalty interests, which have no say or conflict with the operations or permitting of the oil and gas property. But after living in Midland since the 1950s and becoming the longest-serving lawmaker in state history, it's no surprise, Josh, that Tom Craddock is a big deal in West Texas oil.
And tonight, KXAN investigator Jody Barr reveals nearly every city, including Austin, might never have had the authority to issue a single ticket and could be doing so illegally.
They don't make much noise out here. These do most of the talking, telling drivers who might run Austin's red light cameras to ignore the $75 fine. So you believe this is purely about making a buck and nothing about saving lives?
The more I dig into this, the more it all comes down to simply the dollars.
Byron Schrembrecht's leading a statewide fight against red light camera tickets. He says these cameras are nothing more than roadside ATMs.
No red light camera anywhere in the world has ever taken a red light runner off the street. Only a cop can do that. It's a revenue program that's sold to us as a safety program.
In 2008, Austin installed 9 of these red light cameras across the city. Those cameras have racked up nearly 80,000 tickets, earning the city of Austin more than $5.5 million in fines. In fact, we discovered the number of drivers running red lights at those intersections in recent years has gone up consistently, hitting an all-time record in 2016.
It's addressed to me, and it's got the date and the time. It has the 3 still pictures.
A few years ago, Russell Bowman got a ticket from a red light camera in Richardson, Texas. Bowman, an attorney, went to work to figure out what gives Texas cities the right to use a red light camera. Some people may look at this and say, man, it's only $75. Why have you chosen to fight so hard?
The biggest thing, was the principle.
In 2007, the state passed a law allowing cities to install these cameras only after one important requirement: perform a traffic engineering study, signed and sealed by a licensed Texas engineer. Bowman found the city of Richardson never did that study.
You want to do this the hard way? Great, we'll do this the hard way.
Bowman took his case to district court, arguing the city did not have the legal authority to issue red light camera tickets. A Dallas County judge agreed.
The law is what it is, so if it says you're prohibited from doing this unless you do an engineering study, then do your engineering study. If this thing is that significant to safety, you would think a city would do that.
We filed public records requests with every Texas city with red light cameras. We wanted to see if each one had its required engineering study. Of the cities that responded, only 3 appear to have performed an actual study: College Station, South Lake, and Abilene. Why was that so important?
Very simply to show the need. We did not want these to become little ATMs along the highway.
State Representative Jim Murphy co-wrote the state's red light camera law. Murphy says the words traffic engineering study were written into the law for a very specific reason.
We want an engineer, a licensed professional, to stand behind that study.
Because what does that study tell you?
Well, it's going to tell us that it was done to certain standards. So as to say the conditions merit a red light camera, and there is no other alternative.
We showed Murphy 2 different engineering studies, one from Abilene, the other from Austin. This is the city of Abilene's engineering study.
Right, right.
And you'll see on the front of that there's a seal.
Absolutely, 2 of them as a matter of fact.
Is that what you meant when you wrote this bill?
Now, this is absolutely what we meant to do, Jody.
Here's the city of Austin's engineering study.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't find an engineer's name on this study, a signature, a seal.
Clearly, these are in 2 different worlds. This is not a sealed study.
Is that what you intended?
It is not.
The city of Austin defends its camera system, claiming it did not have to have a licensed engineer to do its traffic engineering study. We tried several times to have city leaders answer allegations in person. The city declined every request for us to speak with its traffic department and interim city manager. We went to the city council meeting a few weeks ago and caught up with interim city manager Elaine Hart. Hey, Ms. Hart. Hey, I'm Jody with KXAN. We have
you approach the dice.
Okay, well, the meetings, well, that's on the side aisles. The meeting hasn't been called.
You can try to schedule time with her?
Oh, we have, man. For 2 weeks we've been trying this. Miss Hart. I'm Jody with KXAN. We've tried to call her.
Can y'all hit that for me?
Sure.
Okay,
sure.
Thank you very much.
As of this report, the city still has not agreed to an interview. The city of Austin says having these red light cameras has made our roads safer. Well, we checked the city's own records to see if that's accurate. Take a look. Since cameras were installed, the average monthly number of crashes at those intersections has dropped by nearly 60%. Sounds good, right? Well, a closer look shows nearly half of all of those crashes had nothing to do with the light.
KXAN investigator Jody Barr found the state hasn't always held political candidates accountable for breaking the law, and something never even brought up until we started asking questions.
Yep, and when they failed to file finance records, these men, they racked up fines. The man owing the third most at $22,000, Chris Crystal, a former state Senate candidate from San Antonio. You'll meet him later. In second, Big Ben lawyer Anthony Foster Jr., who ran for a judgeship, he owes $30,000. But the man with the most outstanding debt, a sitting Texas House member, Representative Ron Reynolds, currently owes $52,000. When you get a fine, you're supposed to face consequences if you don't pay. But we've discovered the agency in charge hasn't always been making people like these guys pay up. Yo, Mr. Reynolds. Hey, I'm Jody Barr with KXAN. We've been trying to get a hold of you for several weeks. Our analysis of State Ethics Commission data shows Representative Ron Reynolds failed to file 8 separate campaign reports since 2015. To find out why, we called, we emailed, but he never replied. Do you plan to pay these fines? Yes. Do you plan to file the reports?
They gave me 10 days to pay it or make arrangements.
This is Chris Crystal, the man who's number 3 on our list of people who haven't paid up. Something he says came as quite a surprise since his campaign raised no money.
I called and they said, yeah, you didn't do your personal financial statements. I said, okay. I said, well, I mean, I didn't raise $1, so what do I need to do? And she goes, oh, it's long past that. You got to go to court now.
Crystal says he tried, but the commission would not waive his fines. He now owes nearly $22,000 for failing to file the required finance reports when he ran for Senate back in 2012. I mean, these dates are known. You do admit you missed them, you violated.
Absolutely.
And he's not alone. We found 264 candidates on the state's debtor list. 3 current Texas House members, Representatives Donna Dukes, Nicole Collier, and Ron Reynolds. There are also 5 sitting district court judges and 80 attorneys.
The Texas Ethics Commission will come to order.
The Texas Ethics Commission has 2 options when candidates fail to file financial forms: civil fines and, in extreme cases, a criminal charge. Specifically, the commission can refer debtors to prosecutors when they don't file this form. But in the past 5 years, that only happened 26 times. Ron Reynolds, not one of them. We asked the commission chair why. Could you tell us why this representative, for example, has not been referred to prosecution when it's clear by his record he has made a habit of not filing these reports?
Yeah, I just don't know about this matter at all. I'm sorry. Any matters regarding complaints like this initially are confidential.
If we say we believe in transparency, well then this is step 1 in all of that. File your reports.
Representative Celia Israel sits on the House Elections Committee, which helps write campaign finance laws. One of her fellow committee members, Ron Reynolds.
It is ironic. It is unfortunate. It puts a stain on the honor of those of us who are simply trying to do the best we can for our constituents and for the state of Texas.
What would you say to this representative if he was in here today about complying, paying his debt to society?
Anybody who disregards the rules is letting themselves down, is letting their constituents down, and is letting the rest of us down who are trying to follow the rules.
Despite his unpaid fines, Reynolds is running for office again, and so can anyone on this list.
What you're unearthing may involve a bill so that we put more teeth or more structure to a situation, in which case the interim hearing is a good time to ask these kinds of questions. One angle might be, no, you don't get to be on the ballot again until you until you clear this.
You raised these questions, and because of that, we were happy to have it briefed today. And thank you so much for bringing it to our attention. It was very nice of you.
It was the 17,000, and the second case was one.
Meanwhile, Chris Crystal is slowly working to pay his debt to Texas.
This is a 40-year payoff. If I'm hoping I hit the lottery or something so I can pay these guys. They don't play, and I'm making payments. And if you want to see mine, I'll show you every little bit I got. I'm not lying. If I'm lying, I'm dying.
As for the two men at the top of the list, they are not being prosecuted. Just 2 weeks after we caught up with Representative Reynolds at that committee meeting, he turned in his finance forms. But he is making payments on his debt, sort of. That's because the state is seizing his legislative paychecks. It doesn't look like Foster is paying back anything right now, and we have not been able to track him down to ask why. Our investigation did find the Ethics Commission referring some debtors to the Attorney General's office for collections, $1.2 million in the past 5 years, of which the AG's only collected about $300,000 so far.
Well, what happened to the cases that were prosecuted?
Well, Robert, I can tell you that only 9 were ever charged. 7, though, were dismissed.
So why aren't more prosecuted?
Well, by law, the commission is supposed to have a system in place to refer cases to court. Now, there is a decade of gaps in the commission's records, so they cannot tell us whether they ever referred anyone for prosecution between 2005 and 2013. For the last 5 years, the commission's been experimenting with a system, but tonight, just weeks after we brought this issue up, a new permanent system is in place for criminal referrals.
Jody, we know you'll be staying on top of the commission's progress.
Yes, and I promise to follow up with Representative Israel and the rest of the House Elections Committee for you too.
All right, Jody, thank you. And if you want to see the 264 people on the state's debtors list, before you head to the polls, we've posted them all in this story in the investigative section of KXAN.com right now.